The next item on our agenda is something I know that all of us have been looking forward to, and that's to have an opportunity to hear from Canada's Minister for International Trade, the Honourable Chrystia Freeland. She has had, and she continues to have, just a fascinating career. I'll give you some of the highlights now, but I'd also encourage you to visit her full profile on the Green Chamber Guide, a new digital resource tool developed by iPolitics, and the link is right here on the screen. Now, Minister Freeland was first elected as the Member of Parliament for Toronto Centre in a by-election in November of 2013, and then as the Member of Parliament for University Rosedale in October of last year. A native of High River, Alberta, she received her undergraduate degree from Harvard University and continued her studies on a Rhodes Scholarship at Oxford University, so a stellar academic career. She began her career in journalism in Ukraine for the Financial Times, the Washington Post, and the Economist, and she went on to numerous larger responsibilities at the Financial Times, including deputy editor, UK news editor, Moscow bureau chief, Eastern Europe correspondent, editor of its weekend edition, and editor of FT.com. Between 1999 and 2001, she served as deputy editor of the Globe and Mail before becoming a managing editor at the Financial Times. In 2010, she joined Canadian-owned Thomson Reuters as editor-at-large. Most recently, she worked as managing director and as editor of Consumer News, in addition to being a weekly columnist for the Globe and Mail, writing extensively about the challenges facing the middle class. Minister, if I can just add a word as well, I had the privilege of attending a roundtable that you and the Prime Minister held in Manila at the time of the APEC CEO conference. And what I said to the Prime Minister then, I'd like to repeat before this crowd today, and it's to say that one of the great pleasurable elements in the federal cabinet was the announcement that you would be taking on this responsibility. You bring to this job a personal commitment, energy, and intellect, experience, which will be very helpful to us in strengthening our relationship with our trading partners around the world. And the openness that you've shown, the outreach that you've done in the very short time in which you've been minister, the unbelievable energy in terms of trying to keep the pace that you've been setting, all inspire us to believe that you'll be an outstanding trade minister. Ladies and gentlemen, will you join me in welcoming the Honourable Minister Chrystia Freeland.
Well, thank you very much, Perrin. Those were incredibly generous remarks. I really appreciate it. And I should just start by acknowledging and thanking you and sharing with people here the important role the Canadian Chamber of Commerce and you personally are playing, you know, both as a private sounding board for me. There have been a number of big decisions that I've had to take, and Perrin is one of the very few people that I'm sure to have a conversation with at those moments, and your private advice has been very, very valued. And of course, the really important public work that you do personally, that the whole chamber does in promoting trade and Canada being plugged into the global economy, really essential. I do want to also start by explaining my outfit today. Today is Deň Vyshyvanky. That means the day of the embroidered shirt. My colleague Kyle Peterson, who I think is actually Kyle Petrishin back in the day, is wearing an embroidered tie. This is a very important Ukrainian national symbol, the embroidered shirt worn by men and women. And today is the day Ukrainians all over the world are wearing them. I'm Ukrainian Canadian, but very many of the MPs you'll see in the House today are wearing them now. So that's why I'm so colorful. Le Canada est une nation commerçante. Le commerce international et l'investissement sont importants pour le Canada et les Canadiens. Le commerce international et l'investissement sont essentiels à notre niveau de vie et à l'amélioration du niveau de vie des habitants de 4 coins du monde. Le commerce, c'est ce qui nous permet de voir les marchés aux biens et aux services du Canada, de favoriser la croissance des entreprises exportatrices, de créer des emplois ainsi que de fournir des choix et des prix bas aux consommateurs canadiens. We really do believe our government, and we understand very profoundly that Canada is a trading nation. Trade is equivalent to 60% of our GDP. It creates good jobs in Canada and good paying jobs. Jobs in the tradable part of our economy are 14% higher paid on average than jobs in the non-tradable sector. So this is a really deep commitment of our government. It's something the Prime Minister has charged me with doing. Making sure that Canada continues to be plugged into the global economy, and that we open up even more markets. And in fact, this incredibly impressive head table, which Perrin so appropriately acknowledged, is a great tour d'horizon of where we're going on trade. Starting perhaps with Japan, because I'm going there with the Prime Minister for the G7 meetings next week, an incredibly important trading relationship. Japan has done a marvelous job hosting the G7, and we'll be having some meetings with some top Japanese companies led by the Prime Minister to make that relationship even closer. So good to have the German ambassador here, because we are in the home stretch of this incredibly important, incredibly ambitious, high-quality agreement, CETA. On February 29th, we completed the legal scrub of that deal, and I announced together with Cecilia Malmström, the European Trade Commissioner, that we intend to sign it this year, and we are confident it will come into force early next year. That is a landmark agreement, and it's a landmark moment for Canada and Europe. Delighted the Mexican ambassador is here as well, working directly on our relationship with Mexico, but also on our trilateral relationship. Our NAFTA relationship is a huge priority for our government. I think I see the Mexican Trade Minister, Ildefonso. I've been seeing him once a week for the past few weeks. And he's coming, and I'll see him again early next month, and then at the end of the month. So we're trying to do like a twice a month meeting schedule. He's coming again for the NALS Summit and for the state visit in June. And then, of course, crucially, our Asian partners. We were delighted in opposition, and it's important when you're in opposition to support work of the government that you think is positive. And as trade critic, I was very proud to strongly support our trade agreement with Korea. And I will be visiting Korea next week to follow up on that and really start getting the fruits of it. And then, of course, our High Commissioner from India. As people know from my mandate letter, one of the principal duties with which the Prime Minister has charged me is to expand our economic relationship with emerging markets, particularly in emerging Asia. And he had a shout out for India and China. And I'm delighted that my Indian colleague, Nirmala, is coming to Canada next month on June 10th, and we're going to have a meeting to really try to advance that. I'm going to sit down and let Perrin ask me questions, but I just, as a final thought, want to say to you and say to the people in this room, this is a crowd where I think if I said who's in favor of free trade, everyone would put their hands up. But I think we all have to appreciate that we are living in an incredibly protectionist moment. The waves of protectionism are rising around the world. People are talking about building walls rather than bringing us more closely together. That's really serious. And we in Canada should not think, there's something in the air or the water that is going to make us immune to that particular kind of political swing. So I think now is a moment when it is particularly incumbent on, groups like the group that Perrin has so terrifically assembled here to really work hard on ensuring that we as a country remain, whatever our party, broadly committed to being a global economy, that we remain really broadly committed to being plugged into the world. And that sort of broad, and it's not just communication, that broad strategy of ensuring Canadian support for openness. I think it's partly about ensuring that our trade agreements really work for the Canadian middle class and people striving to join it is a huge part of our government's work, of my work, and I would really ask everyone here to join me in that because I think it needs to be a shared enterprise. Okay, Perrin, do your worst.
Minister, thank you very much. Certainly the words that you expressed regarding your and your government's commitment to open trade is something that is very heartening, I think, for all of us to hear. And yet, increasingly in the international dialogue, what we're hearing is voices in opposition to it. It seemed a few years ago as if globalization was unstoppable. Now it doesn't seem so unstoppable. We look south of the border at the debate taking place there. How do you handicap the prospects at the present time for us making significant progress in reaching wide-ranging trade agreements on a multilateral basis? The WTO's becalmed. Where do you think TPP is going? What do you see as next steps?
So that is a really big question. Let me start with the start of your question, which was about this sort of rising tide of protectionism. And I think that there is actually a strategy to get past it or to counter it. And it's something that we're talking about, Canada is talking about in international fora. I was just at the APEC summit at the beginning of this week in Peru. I think we need to start building something that I like to characterize as a progressive trade agenda. We need to really start both talking about trade, but also building into how we do trade, a real focus on how it delivers for the middle classes in our country. That means a real focus when you're doing the agreements on what is this going to do for middle class jobs in my country, a real sustained focus on small and middle-sized businesses. I think it also means thinking about from the beginning environmental and labor protections, making that not like an add-on, but a core part of the trade agenda. And I think if we do that, then I think there is an opportunity to keep on moving forward with trade. But I think your concern is absolutely well placed. And I think, sometimes when I've talked about this in Canada, people have said to me, oh, you're too worried about it. It's just other countries, which I better not name because I'm now a minister, that are going a little bit crazy. It's not going to happen here in Canada. But I really do think we need to very fundamentally, if we believe it's important for Canada to be an open society and an open economy, which I very much do, we need to be really committed to building a Canadian trade agenda, which is a progressive trade agenda for the people, and also be part of an international trade agenda to move in that direction. And actually at APEC, we had some very good conversations around that because all of my colleagues from around the world are really worried about this. On specific agreements, I think they can get done. I've talked about CETA already. This is a huge deal. This is a trade agreement which is actually in many ways a deeper agreement than NAFTA. I am confident that we will get it done. We had a very good visit yesterday from Martin Schulz, who is a German social democrat and the president of the European Parliament. And he has become a real supporter of this agreement. He hasn't been all along. And if we can get that done, if we can actually do a trade deal with the European Union, and I hope the German ambassador won't mind if I say it's quite hard to do deals with Europe. If we can thread that needle, that's going to be, especially in this age of rising populism, that's going to be an impressive accomplishment for Europe and for Canada, and we're going to do it.
And the timing on that?
Well, what Cecilia Malmstrom and I have said is we are confident it's going to get signed this year and will go into force early next year, and I believe that we're going to achieve that. There's a lot of work to be done. Anyone here who either is a European business person or does business in Europe, please help me with this. Please talk to your European governments who you work with, your European MEPs who you work with, about CETA and its importance. A joint Canada-EU study that we did on CETA found that it will increase Canada's GDP by 0.77%. That is a non-trivial number. When we're talking about total GDP growth in a year, maybe being 1.7, 1.9, an economic lever that gives us 0.77% boost without spending a lot of money, that's huge.
So the other pending agreement, TPP, where are we on that at this point?
So we had a TPP trade ministers breakfast at APEC. I've been traveling so much I have to remember which day it is. So today is Thursday. The breakfast was in Arequipa, Peru on Tuesday. And most of the conversation was about all of the TPP trade ministers talking about where they are in their domestic processes. As people here know, the TPP agreement was signed by all 12 countries on the 4th of February. And from that date, all of the TPP signatory countries have 2 years to debate and discuss that agreement. And that's what everybody is doing. I think for us in Canada, particularly since we are a new government that inherited a deal that had already been concluded, and particularly given what I've been saying about this need for a progressive trade agenda and to really build public buy-in to trade agreements, our consultation process on the TPP that our government has initiated is incredibly important. It's important for people to have an opportunity to discuss this 6,000-page agreement and to know that they have been heard. I urge people, and I would love to have, I know the Canadian Chamber of Commerce has been engaged. I would urge everyone here who has an interest in the agreement, come to either one of the town halls that I'm holding. Our government has done more than 200 consultations. But also, and I do really want to recognize the work of my colleague Kyle Peterson, member of Parliament, and also a leading voice on our Trade Committee. We really believe in the importance of Parliament and of the work of our parliamentary committees. And I am a little bit biased, but I think the Trade Committee is the most outstanding, hardest working one in Parliament. You think I'm just saying that because they're my guys, my friends, but they have been doing an outstanding job. They have been going around the country talking to Canadians about TPP last week, and correct me if I'm wrong, Kyle, I think you were in Windsor, Toronto, Quebec City, and Montreal. And in each of those cities, the Trade Committee had an open mic. So they had witnesses who had been arranged to speak to the committee, but they also had an open mic. Anyone who wanted to could come and speak. And to me, that kind of an approach, which I have spoken to my fellow TPP ministers about, is a really essential part of maintaining and building that grassroots support for us to be a trading nation. So thanks for your hard work, Kyle.
The committee has been doing an outstanding job on going around and meeting with people. Okay, just between us, nobody will say a word. When will the government announce?
There are no journalists here.
No
right?
journalists here. When will the government announce its decision?
Which decision?
TPP.
We really believe that this is an important process of consultation and discussion, and we're going to let the committee do its work.
Is it unrelated to presidential campaigns south of the border and the timing there?
This is a Canadian process, and it's a Canadian discussion. And what I think is really important, and I was very glad to be in Arequipa and to talk to the other TPP trade ministers. This is a none of the 12 TPP countries has yet ratified the agreement. Everyone now, this is a really big agreement. It's a very complicated agreement. It's 6,000 pages. In each of those 12 TPP countries, everyone is having a national debate. And I'm a Canadian nationalist, so I'm going to say, I think we're doing the best job. I mean, and I really especially, I think, the depth of consultations our government is doing is great, but really the Trade Committee's work is the crown jewel of this process. And I've been saying to my fellow trade ministers, because they want to know, how come there is such broad general public support in Canada for being an open society, open on trade, but also open on refugees, right? People kind of can't understand why we still have this national consensus. And I've really been pointing to the work of our Trade Committee, and I'm saying if you want public support, you have to let the public be heard and create the space for people to talk and debate. We're really committed to doing that.
We have microphones here, and I want to get to anyone in the audience who has questions. So please, if you have a question for the minister, please come up to the microphone. Let me ask one last question before that, and that's after the two agreements that we've talked about, what's next on the priority list? India, China, where else would you be looking?
So CETA, the work on CETA is not yet complete. And I want to thank the German ambassador for his hard work on this. I know he's going to Europe next week and is going to keep on working on it. We are not taking our eye off the ball on that. That is not done until it's done, and I am incredibly focused on that. And I need everyone in this room who has a European interest to support me in this. It's a historic deal for Canada, and let's not lose focus or consider that it is finished until it's actually finished. We're also this year, and actually it's quite appropriate I should say this given my Vishivanka, as stated in my mandate letter, we're going to conclude our free trade agreement with Ukraine. That's going to be only the second free trade agreement that Ukraine does. The new post-Maidan Ukraine, they've done their deal with Europe. We're going to finish that agreement with Canada. I hope within the next couple of months. So that is a big deal. And then, as my mandate letter says, and as I mentioned briefly, the Prime Minister has instructed me to work very hard on our trade agreements with emerging Asia. Trade agreements, and maybe I should say more broadly, as the mandate letter says, our trading relationship and our economic relationship with emerging markets, with a particular focus on the economic ties between Canada and India and China. And I do want to say, we are not forgetting the country that can sometimes too often not be mentioned when we talk about, brave new frontiers. I'm very conscious, and we in fact had a meeting today of the Canada-US Cabinet Subcommittee, which I chair. I'm never losing sight of the US. More than 70% of our trade is with the United States. That is the essential economic relationship. And it's really important, even as we pursue deepening ties with these other countries, never to forget we also need to continue to deepen our relationship with the US. And we're doing actually a lot there. Behind the headlines, a lot of real work on deepening ties is happening. For example, the regulatory cooperation and the efforts between Canada and the US to harmonize our regulations, to find those places where the regulations are almost the same but not quite, and figure out if there's a way to bring them in line with one another. There are very many business people in this room, and you will know that it is the details like that which can be central to whether you're actually able to have an effective commercial relationship or not.
Japan, you'll be going with the Prime Minister shortly to Tokyo. Is there room for a bilateral agreement between Canada and Japan, irrespective of what happens to TPP?
Our visit to Japan is very important, and I'm very grateful to the ambassador for the work he's doing on that relationship, and also in working on this visit. And we're looking forward to seeing him now in his home. And also to having some great sushi. I know the ambassador is a real expert on that subject.
And sake.
And sake. I'm a minister, so I couldn't possibly indulge in that. And we will have a particular focus on the auto industry in some of our meetings. So it is a really, really important trading relationship. And we're certainly always keen to deepen and strengthen that relationship.
I'm going to take the conversation a little bit of a different direction. Part of the day here today was talking about data and the ability of Canadian companies to enter export markets through digital means. And I'm just curious about what your government is doing right now to help those companies enter global value chains. We've heard a lot about innovation and the ability to to enter those global markets. You have existing structures. Have some of those existing structures been examined for the shift towards the digital economy?
And do you mean now for companies that are in the digital sector and them going global, or companies using the new technologies to go global more effectively?
I'm thinking more along the companies that are using those digital technologies to go global, where traditionally you would enter the Canadian market first to test yourself and then go global, where that's not necessary anymore. And what are some of the structures that you might see change over the course of the next little while?
Yeah, so I think that is an excellent question, and it is an area of particular obsession of mine. And I think actually, the fact that it's the 21st century and we're living in the age of the technology revolution means not only can companies go global earlier in their evolution, but smaller companies can go global more easily. I really think that we as a government need to work to make that easier, to help make the connections. In my mandate letter, one of my jobs is to develop a renewed export and investment strategy, and that piece that you touch on is going to be a big part of it. We'll be doing broad consultations around that strategy, so I would love to hear from the Chamber, from specific business groups, how we can do it. We've sort of started dipping our toes in the water, and I'll give a shout out to Susan Bincoletto, my Assistant Deputy Minister, because this is her program. We have a program called Can Export that we announced on January 5th in Waterloo. This is connected to that question because it's focused on helping small and medium-sized companies enter the global economy. Companies can get matching grants from the government of between $10,000 and $100,000 to help them explore a new market they haven't been engaged in. And we're finding very much that digital tools are facilitating that. So I think we definitely have to explore ways to help companies do that. The Prime Minister really believes that the trade agreements with which we started our conversation are really only half of my job. Because if we sign trade agreements but we don't take advantage of them, what was the point? And so we're very focused in the department on coming up with a program and a plan to really engage Canadian companies in these new markets that we've opened up, with a particular focus on the small and medium-sized companies. And I'll just say one thing about actual digital companies who are part of that picture. The really amazing and powerful thing is many of these companies go global immediately. I had a great conversation last week with Toby Lutke, our Canadian hero of Shopify. And he told me that it was only a year after founding the company that he got his first Canadian customer. So we really need to start in this digital age thinking about globalization as something that can happen to companies on day one, and a space in which small and medium-sized companies can and need to play. Thanks for the very important question. I'm looking forward to your paper you're going to write for us about how we can do that, okay?
Absolutely.
Thanks, Scott. And Minister, I know your timetable is very tight. I think
yes,
you
it
may
is.
have time for
Just one more.
last question.
Minister, thanks for taking the time to share with us your views. I guess I'll start off with a comment and a question. I work for a U.S.-based multinational technology company. My comment is that...
Which is the company?
Xerox Corporation.
Okay.
And
You have a great CEO.
well, we do, who you met at the White House during the state dinner for Prime Minister Trudeau. And she's a big fan of yours, by the way. My comment is we're pleasantly surprised by the technical and tactical proficiency. I know this is something that you don't hear too often in government, but I guess my comment is just to praise the robust nature of the Canadian trade policy team. Particularly, one of the most recent engagements we had was related to the Information Technology Agreement. Mm-hmm. And the trade policy staff were very heavily engaged and consulted with industry, ourselves included. We actually have foreign direct innovation investments in Canada, which eclipse some of the other investments we have in other parts of the world. And there were some elements of the ITA list in terms of trade tariff-exempt products that are relevant to the research, development, and engineering that we do in Canada. and the trade policy staff here were very, very quick to understand, take the brief, and also incorporate that into the Canadian negotiating position and find positions of common cause with USTR. So my comment is congratulations and appreciation for what has consistently been a very robust trade policy capacity here in Canada in your department. My question really relates to foreign direct investment, and I guess I'm curious to know, as an individual working in a multinational that has flourished in Canada, I'm curious to know, given the fact that my multinational corporation is actually, if you can believe it, the only company in our competitive space that's doing value-added advanced materials research here in Canada under a global mandate, what's your take on the imperative of creating conditions and incentives for filling the gap in foreign direct investment, particularly in technology and innovation-intensive enterprises like ours, so that we're not as lonely when it comes down to research, development, and engineering in this country?
Okay, wow, what a great question. So first of all, thank you for your kind comments. And I'm going to have to say I can't take very much, if any, personal credit for the excellence of our truly terrific public servants in the trade space. But I'm very glad that you mentioned that. I think that sometimes it's easy to denigrate the importance and the skills and the talents of the public service. Exactly the group you highlighted, our trade policy team is outstanding. They are really, really smart and engaged, and do a fiercely good job. It's an honor for me to work with them, and I'm going to pass that message on. And I'm glad you raised the ITA because it's one of my favorite agreements. And in particular, back to your starting question, Perrin, you talked about, is it possible to do multilateral agreements? And actually at Nairobi, we got the ITA done. It's not a multilateral, it's a plurilateral. But there are 52 countries. That's a lot, including crucially China, including China, the EU, the US, and this is a really significant deal opening up a significant part of the economic space. So things can be done if you work at it and are focused. And look, I love your question about getting more research and innovation in the global technology space being done in Canada. It's a huge focus of mine. I want us to have, frankly, global champion companies that are headquartered in Canada in that space. I want us to have more Toby Lutke's, and he does too, and we're working on that, and to help those companies, to help those Canadian, we're pretty good at startups, but I want us to be better at scaling up our startups into global champions. And I absolutely share that ambition. I want more companies like Xerox headquartering a big part of their global R&D capacity here in Canada. I am working right now on 2 big global companies to get them to do that. I can't tell you who they are because they haven't decided to do it yet. But I talk to their CEOs a lot and bug and pester them. So I hope you'll have more company soon. And let's talk about ways that you guys can help tell them. I was going to say that the water's warm. It's not always, but that this is a great place to do business because I think it really, really is. I have to go now for embroidered shirt celebrations.
This is politics.
It's actually
true. This is important.
Yes.
Minister, thank you very much. You've demonstrated to all of us again today both the experience and the knowledge that you bring to the job, but also your personal commitment. We're very grateful to you for taking the time to be with us. And in particular, we thank you for your incredible efforts you're making on behalf of Canada. Thanks so much.
Thank you.